Alright everyone, sometimes people try to like paint me into a corner and say I'm like far right and stuff like that. And this is because most people are too dumb to think outside of the two-party dichotomy box. And so they think you're either a Democrat or a Republican. Like it doesn't even register that there are people that are nonpartisan like me that exist that don't have any party loyalty at all. And it doesn't dawn on them that it's possible to not be just a generic sort of cookie-cutter conservative or liberal. And so they try to put you in one side or the other because they can't think beyond it. Their IQ is too low. So I thought I would talk about things that I generally overlap with liberals on. And by this, by and large, I'm not talking about like AOC and socialists and the far left. I'm not talking about leftists. I'm talking about real, honest-to-goodness liberals like the kind that fought against the Iraq War. Like real liberals, not like Jank, not like, all of these other sellouts that either got rich or went, all the way out into left field so far that they're outside of the stadium, like lunatics like Maxine Waters. So if you talk about like guns and taxes and PC censorious bullshit, I side with the right. But these are issues on which I side with the left, kinda, sorta, and there are some caveats. Number one is gay rights. I supported equality for gays and gay marriage and stuff before it was fashionable. Quite some time ago. Like Vermont had legalized gay marriage, I think, by that point. But in most states it was illegal. Some of them had civil unions. Gay rights was an issue, but it was one that was hotly debated. What I never understood is how you could have a public debate over whether people should have equal rights. I thought that was a little bit odd. And it is a little bit odd. There are still people who are stuck up about it and fucking they can't get over the issue. It's like it's the law of the land. It should have been the law of the land all along. We're talking about government contracts, not religious marriage. What are you talking about? The thing I would differentiate myself with like the far left on is they think that I guess you need to give like preferential treatment, affirmative action, reparations or something to those who are homosexual. I disagree entirely. That's inequality and that perpetuates animus between different disparate groups of people at the hands of big government. Just treat people equally. Problem solved. People should be able to marry who they want. Who cares? As long as they're all consenting adults. Number two would be abortion. I'm unabashedly pro-choice. And I know this is the big one that I spar with people on in my own audience sometimes. Like some of you are not pro-choice. Some of you are pro-life. Okay, I can understand, especially from a religious standpoint, why people might have that particular view. My problem mainly boils down to I don't want the government having the power to make medical decisions. The government should have far less sway over medicine than it already has. I don't want to give it power over that because it sets a terrible legal precedent, which is the government can determine the morality of medical procedures. You can have an open debate over whether a fetus counts as having sovereign personhood for constitutional legal reasons. The thing is, the government should not be arbitrarily being the one to determine that. That should not be determined by government. Ultimately, people, and they should make that decision on their own, in consultation with those they trust. It could be a religious leader, spouse, partner, friends, family, whatever. Or maybe it's just their decision alone and they don't consult with anyone. They've got to do what they've got to do. That's my ultimate view on that. I know some people are like, well, it's a life. You're a baby killer. Well, again, that's a debate you can have, but the government shouldn't be the one to determine that. The government, I do not trust to make moral decisions. I trust a government that kills hundreds of thousands of people in a godforsaken desert somewhere to make moral decisions? No, thank you. I think they're the last group of people in the world that should make that sort of call. They're the least moral. Because what happens is that they make decisions primarily with an eye to line their own pockets or expand their power more. That's really what it's about, so fuck them. Number three would be drugs and the drug war. For those not aware, I took psychedelics back in the day. This is like 7 years ago, or maybe 8 now, actually. I'm losing track of time because of all the drugs I did. It's terrible. No, I'm just joking. These days, caffeine, my main drug of choice. Caffeine and chamomile. It's like you get your uppers and your downers. Eventually, it's going to cause me to go into cardiac arrest, but it's okay. Everyone dies someday. Some just a lot earlier than others. But with the drug war, this boils down to there are so many different reasons I oppose the drug war. The first is that the cost is inordinate. If people really discuss, like if fiscal conservatives that tend to be on board with the drug war knew how much it was costing in tax money, oh my God, they'd be against it the next day. They'd say, oh no, maybe George Washington grew marijuana, so it's okay. Kinda, he grew hemp. They made rope out of it for shipping and stuff. The non-smokable, well, you can smoke hemp. I don't know why you would want to, but you can. That's what they were growing back then. So the first opposition is just it's not cost effective. It costs a lot of money, doesn't give any return because it doesn't treat addicts or anything like that. Number two is the moral situation. It's just wrong to take someone who's just smoking a joint, throw them in jail with rapists and murderers. Number three is strictly pragmatic, which is that if we were to end the drug war, all that money, we could pump some of it into our police. Number one, they're not doing no-knock raids because someone smelled pot. That means that they're exposed to less danger. They'd have more time and more money and resources to go after actual criminals, like carjackers and arsonists and serial rapists and stuff like that. They could actually catch more of these people, put them in jail where they belong. And also, we could clean out our prisons. You realize what proportion of people, it's a double-digit proportion of people that are in our prisons under drug laws. Some of them, they're totally non-violent. Most of them are non-violent offenders. They're not in there because they smoked a joint and then assaulted someone. They're in there because they smoked a joint. Or in some cases, drug dealing. But when they say drug dealers, that's a little bit of a gray area situation. What do you mean drug dealer? Because people can be prosecuted for dealing. Like here in Vermont, where it had been decriminalized already, you could still get thrown in jail for intent to deal if you had 1.5 ounces of marijuana. I think that's unacceptable. I don't care if someone drives around with 10 pounds of marijuana. I don't care if they are dealing marijuana. Shouldn't be a crime. I don't care if they're dealing heroin or crack. Are they sitting next to an elementary school trying to get kids high? Then it's a crime. There's no informed consent. It violates the NAP. Are they giving it to adults that are seeking them out because they want crack or heroin? Yes. Get them into rehab. Get them into rehab. Simple as that. And the fact is that a free market suppressed becomes a black market. I would rather put people that are addicted in rehab than in jail. And everybody else, it's like, what are you talking about, dude? It shouldn't be a crime at all. Simple possession, even dealing in most cases, should not be a crime. Certainly public intoxication applies. It can be an aggravating factor the same as alcohol in a violent crime, the commission of any other form of crime, property crime, assault, whatever it happens, attempted murder. That would still apply. DUI would apply. Nobody wants people that are on shrooms driving around, they're looking at the road and it's, wiggling around and there are ghosts flying around and crazy shit. It's not safe. But at the same time, if they're just sitting in their backyard, I don't care what kind of drugs they're using. I literally do not care if people smoke meth and die in their backyards. It's their choice. It's their fucking life. They can do also, they can drink themselves to death. They can play Russian roulette. It's not legal to kill yourself. Not that that helps. It's unenforceable. It doesn't make any sense. There are so many drugs. You walk by drugs if you go for a hike. You're probably walking by amanita mushrooms. You're probably walking by nightshade and fucking there could be psilocybin mushrooms out there. There's lactica virosa. That's a potent drug enough. There are all sorts of morning glory in your garden, the heavenly blue, pearly gates, and flying saucers. Those are a drug. You crush up a few hundred seeds, you put it in some applesauce, you ingest it, you'll get high. It's a drug. It's a potent psychedelic. It's just like LSD. It's LSD's little cousin. It's perfectly legal. There you go. Totally unenforceable bullshit. So I agree with the left on that. End the drug war. I go further than most leftists. Hell, even the AOCs of the world aren't saying the stuff I'm saying. I say legalize heroin. Yeah, absolutely. And don't tax it. Just get people rehab if they're fucked up. I'd say environmentalism would be number 4. After a fashion, again with a caveat. They think environmentalism is pass a carbon tax so that we can export heavy industry to Asia. Out of sight, out of mind. It's NIMBY bullshit. It won't solve any problems. And so that they can tax people more. It's essentially climate change has been used to push a series of ideas that are just taxes because they want more of people's money. And it's not really going to make anything cleaner. It's just going to throttle Western industry and it'll make their air a little bit more breathable while making a bunch of Chinese people and Indian people sick. It really is NIMBY bullshit. It's the opposite of ethical. It won't help the world at all. It won't stop climate change if indeed it's real, anthropogenic, and a risk. So it's bullshit. When I say environmentalism, I'm like reforestation. That's important. Minding our resources, conservation. Like we've got a looming phosphate crisis where most of the world's easily extracted phosphate resources are beginning to drain. And that's going to be a big crisis in 50 years, but nobody talks about it because people are very short-sighted. They only worry about the here and now or the short term. They worry about a year from now, 2 years from now. You tell them 50 years from now we're going to run out of phosphates and all those root crops. You know where your sugar comes from? It doesn't come from sugar cane. It comes from sugar beets. What do beets and other root crops really, really need? They need a lot of phosphate. Where are you going to get your sugar, dude? Look at all the corn syrup that you have. Don't you think you're going to need those fertilizers to grow these crops? Enjoy your dystopian future when people are scarfing down sweet-tasting chemicals indiscriminately because there's no sugar anymore. You going to pay $20 for a pound of sugar? I don't think so. Enjoy everything you buy at the store being twice as expensive because people didn't know about conservation. There are ways around this. You could really, really slow down to a crawl the amount of fertilizer you need with companion planting, proper crop rotation, preventing runoff, terra preta, hugelkultur. There are a million different fucking methods of reducing the amount of chemical fertilizer needed for even the most mechanized of farming. Nobody uses it. Even contour farming, in most cases, it's still a rarity. I think there's like one farm in the fucking state of Vermont that uses contour farming. That's where the rows follow the lay of the land to reduce runoff. The ridges in the soil help to slow and prevent runoff. They do that a little bit up around Burlington, I think, because they're trying to prevent the Lake Champlain from having too many nitrates leached into it, because they have algal blooms sometimes. But environmentalism is important. Reforestation, clean things up, stop littering. The world has basically stopped the end littering campaigns. A landfill is just a giant pile of trash with a layer of dirt over it that'll spend 500 fucking years degrading. We could be doing something about that. But no. By the way, some people trying to rise up and debate me on plastic bags, they're like, well, paper bags would not degrade either in a landfill. Well, yeah, you don't need to put them in a landfill. Tell people they can reuse the fucking paper bag. They can also use it. You fucking burn the paper bag. It's probably better. By the way, incinerators actually better than recycling for some materials. I would also say, like, basic welfare. This is number 5. Things like SNAP and WIC. Like, a WIC is for low-income families so their kids can have proper nutrition. SNAP is food stamps, basically. I support those. Like, SNAP is basically a net zero. It doesn't actually cost anything. What happens is the person goes out, buys the food, it goes right back into the economy. It stays in the U.S. economy. You got to do something for people. You can't let people starve. If you do that, a libertarian state would begin to break down, because what would happen is people would vote in socialists. And they would have a good thing to harangue about now, wouldn't they? If you provide the basic rudiments for people, so the people who are genuinely needy and not playing the system or anything, especially if they have kids, pregnant women like with WIC or something, you have a better society in general. The cost of enforcing other things probably drops like a rock because you have fewer street urchins trying to pickpocket people, so to speak. It's probably a net positive, at least for those 2 programs. You can talk about other forms of welfare and say maybe not so much on those, though. I would say I think that WIC should be increased. I think we should provide more food for pregnant mothers and mothers that have little kids that are disadvantaged, because the idea is that if the kid gets proper nutrition, the cost of health care and things down the road for that kid is going to be lower. And so you've probably got a net positive. It makes more sense to care for them when they're little, get them started, at least while they're quite young, like toddlers and stuff. Brain formation requires proper nutrition too. You can literally up the population's IQ if you just give people proper nutrition. And preventing some basic childhood diseases, you can give them the $50 worth of food now, or you can pay $100,000 for their surgery 10 years from now, is basically the way that it works. I think it's a good thing. And then finally, I would say religion and state. Some people on the right, and I know this isn't universal, like the populistic, like the Trump side of the right doesn't really do this, but the traditionalists do. They think Jesus needs to be vice president. I totally disagree. I do side with the left in my interpretation of the separation of church and state, which I know is more implied than it is strict. But then again, if you look at what the founders actually suggested, they very deliberately avoided establishing a state religion, and they did that for a reason, because by and large, while they were Christians, they were deistic. They didn't go to church. They were too busy drinking. They didn't go to church. They were too busy studying the occult or like Greek philosophy. They were too busy drinking wine and soliciting prostitutes to go to church. They would have been considered wild men for the most part. They were uncouth. They were the hardy and heavy drinking folks that came across the ocean because to get away from civilization. So yeah, they didn't exactly clean up and go to church on Sunday and sit there, pretending not to be bored and nodding off. If they talked to the preacher at all, it was about philosophy, or as Thomas Jefferson occasionally spoke of, aliens. There was an extraterrestrial craze back in the mid-1700s that almost nobody ever studied in school, so they don't know what happened. That's very interesting stuff. So those are some basic things that I agree with liberals on. More the classically liberal side, which is to say libertarianism after a fashion. The problem is that the further left some leftists go, the more they deviate from that. Because this is a very pro-freedom perspective. It's not like, more reparations, feel-bad microaggressions sort of bullshit that the further left has devolved into. I can't side with the AOCs because, they want socialism. So they want severe authoritarianism, government that's dumb, blind, deaf, and dumb. That's what Bernie Sanders wants. These people must be stopped at all hazards because they would ruin our society. That's about all. Peace out.